Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Stephanie Bree, and today I'm bringing you the top 25 nerd culture movies. These are all the movies that capture what I refer to as nerd culture. Some would say geek culture, but geeks are just wannabe nerds, let's be real. Alright, let's start with number 25. You have Fanboys. What I like about Fanboys is you have a group of nerds who are obsessed with Star Wars, who are desperate to see a print of the new Star Wars at the time, The Phantom Menace, Episode 1, because it had been a while since there had been a new Star Wars movie. But unfortunately, one of the main characters is dying of some disease. It was probably cancer or something. And so they're on a timeline. So they go on a road trip to break into ILM's Skywalker Ranch, so they can see a early cut of the movie. This really captures how like excited and desperate we were in anticipation of the new Star Wars, because it had been a very long time since we had any new Star Wars. Return of the Jedi was 83. I was a year old at the time. The Phantom Menace was 99. That's more than a decade later. So for a child, that's forever. You know, that's my entire childhood. My entire childhood, there was no new Star Wars at all. None. So for a lot of people my age, this movie was very powerful, because it was like, yeah, I remember vividly the drought. The years where people thought Star Wars was uncool, an old hat, nobody liked it anymore. And then the Phantom Menace happened. Love it or hate it, it re-energized the franchise. And today, Star Wars is an unstoppable force. But there was a time where it wasn't. It really was forgotten. There were no toys, no comics, nothing. There was literally nothing happening in the realm of Star Wars. There was like one or two video games here or there, a couple on the NES, a couple on the SNES, maybe one or two arcade games. There wasn't much until, well, at least until the special editions that revived it. But really, it came back to life with The Phantom Menace. Number 24. So, number 24 is a lot more modern than most of the movies on this list. And it's Jay and Silent Bob Reboot. Now, most of your Kevin Smith movies are made by nerds, for nerds, about nerds, targeting nerds, dissecting nerd culture. That's what Kevin Smith does. That's literally his entire shtick. And the Jay and Silent Bob Reboot do a really good job of modernizing our take on nerd culture, mixed in with our the modern lens of toxic fandom and cancel culture. And it does a really good job updating the mythos. But it's still two dumbass stoner nerds being dumbass stoner nerds. Number 23 is Weird Science. This is an early entry in the attempt at Hollywood to pare down and dissect nerd culture. Basically, you have two nerds who are horny as fuck, but total losers and don't know how to say hi to a girl. So they create a girl using their computer, and through movie magic, it gets struck by lightning, and the simulated girl they created becomes a real girl. And then they spin the movie, her teaching them how to be men and talk to girls. It's a pretty fun movie. A little dated, but it's okay. Number 22, The Matrix Revolutions. Now, most of your Matrix movies are going to appear on lists like this. What I like about Matrix Revolutions is it took everything that was a staple in the Matrix. The hacker culture, the sci-fi culture, kung fu movie culture that we were obsessed with. Nerds are really into kung fu movies, and martial arts and stuff like that. And it just sort of added a new layer of deeper sci-fi and a touch of spiritualism, you know, with some of the, you know, the Oracle stuff and the Neo getting powers outside the Matrix, which again, I haven't seen the fourth film, so I don't know how that plays out. But anyways, yeah, the Matrix was a good representation of at least things that appealed to nerds. But also, Neo was definitely a nerd who came into his own. Number 21, I'm going to get shit for this and I don't care. It's Pixels. Look, every nerd hates Adam Sandler. We do. We hate him. He's a piece of shit. He's an asshole. He's not funny. And he usually gives work to other assholes that are not funny. But Pixels is pretty fucking cool. You know, it's all our favorite arcade games from the early to late 70s to early 80s, excuse me. And it's just, it's, you know, it's that episode of Futurama all over again. Basically, it's a live action version of that episode of Futurama. And it's stupid. Yes, it's cheesy, it's dumb, but like that appeals to nerds because we're into cheesy B movies by and large. Number 20 is the previous entry in the Kevin Smith saga. It is Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back. This one is the beginning of internet nerd culture. The whole premise of the movie is Jay and Silent Bob discover there are anonymous assholes on the internet talking shit about them, and they go on a quest to put a stop to it. So it's like nerds coming to terms with the fact that some anonymous asshole can call you an asshole, and you just have to ignore them, or, I don't know, hunt them down and beat them up. That's not realistic, but that was the movie. Number 19, The Matrix Reloaded. Again, going in reverse order, because we're climbing from worst to best. This movie builds upon what The Matrix did, and eventually sets up what Matrix Revolutions would end up with. But this one also gives us more look into the hacking side of things. You also have the techno rave scene, which a lot of nerds were into techno, and raves were like hella popular among nerds, myself included. So yeah, this definitely appealed to us. Number 18 is the Goonies. Again, you have a ragtag bunch of nerds who are going on a hero's journey to basically find a hidden pirate treasure so they can, you know, pay their parents' mortgage so they don't lose their homes. So it's like the fantasy of nerds, you know, using their intellects to save the day. You know, here's a problem. Let's work it out and find a solution. And the solution can't be let's just move across country to another town. The Goonies is hella fun. Number 17 is Superbad. Again, it's another example of nerds who are out of their element, who are way beyond their skill set, that are trying to, quote, fit in an area where they don't belong. Number 16 is Can't Hardly Wait. Now, by and large, Can't Hardly Wait is way more a time capsule of 90s high school culture, teen culture, than it is specifically nerd culture. But the king of the nerds, Seth Green himself, is all over this movie nerding it up. And he is the biggest doofus in this movie. And we love him for it because he's like the coolest dork. And you want to see a cool dork. He's literally a representation of the fictional character in the Offspring's Pretty Fly for a White Guy music video. You know. Number 15 is The Lost Boys. This movie really captures nerd culture because it really dives into comic book culture. You have these two nerds, or actually three nerds, that are obsessed with horror comics and superhero comics. And then they discover, hey, there's actual real fucking vampires in our town. And they draw on their comic book knowledge to murder the motherfucking vampires. It's kind of a superhero fantasy of it's these kids living their superhero dream. Number 40 is The 40-Year-Old Virgin. The title says it all. Moving on. Number 13 is The Matrix. The Matrix is kind of the flagship nerd culture movie for a lot of us. Especially computer nerds. Especially hackers. And I have to clarify, modern times we would refer to them as white hat hackers. You know, the quote, the good people with a computer. But anyways, The Matrix gave us a voice. Gave us a movie that we could be like, hell yeah, this explains everything. And it took a computer nerd, it made him a superhero. Again, that's every nerd's fantasy. Number 12 is Clerks 3. Now, I almost didn't put Clerks 3 on this list at all, but as I revised the list, I realized that no, this is where it belongs, and here's why. Clerks 3 is the nerds who grew up in the 70s, 80s, 90s coming to terms with, shit, we're middle-aged now. We're getting over the hill. We're getting up there. We're not kids anymore. We're not teenagers anymore. And this movie really takes this grown-ass adult who's stuck in his teen youth years and forces him to face reality. And it's like, dude, what have you done with your life? You've read comic books, you've played video games, and you've worked at the Slurpee Mart your whole life. Congratulations, you're a loser. Now you can die sad and alone. And that's very gut-wrenching for a lot of people because we fell in love with Randall and Dante back in the 90s. And it's really just a gut punch to see how that story plays out. But also, shit happens, I mean, a lot of my friends from back then are dead now. Or old and married with kids, or grandkids. A couple of them with grandkids, So yeah, you gotta come to terms with you're gonna grow old, and eventually you're gonna expire. And that's what this movie does. Number 11, jumping ahead. Number 11 is Office Space. This is another one of those, you have a group of nerds who have gone through high school, gone through college, they've been fed the lie that if you go to school and get a degree, you'll get a good job and life will be great. And they realize, this sucks. I'm stuck in a cubicle, in an office, with an air conditioner blowing in my face, no fresh air, no flowers, no sunlight, and a copy machine that doesn't fucking work, and I'm literally just typing on a computer all goddamn day. I've had this job. I've had this very exact job he had in this movie. It is mind-numbingly boring. It's soul-sucking. It will make you want to jump out the window or do what he does in this movie. Basically, throw your hands up and say, fuck it, I'm going to walk out the door and take my chances elsewhere. Office Space is pretty cool. Now we're getting into the top 10. These are the greatest nerd culture movies. I don't necessarily mean greatest in terms of these are great movies. I just mean these are the ones that really capture the essence of being a nerd, one way or another. Number 10 is Chasing Amy. What I like about Chasing Amy is you have a comic book nerd who is also an indie comics creator who has to come to terms with reality that the world is changing, and it isn't just, straight, white, cisgendered, Christian, male, female, have kids, have babies, get married, make more Christians. We now have gay and lesbian and trans people to contend with and accommodate and, understand and basically, be cool with and accepting of. And he's coming to terms with all that smack dab in the middle of a decade where that stuff was kind of counterculture. So, by definition, regardless of interests, if you were in the LGBT community in the 90s, you were automatically lumped in with the nerds because you were automatically othered. You weren't like everybody else. Now, most likely, you also gravitated to nerd stuff like comic books and video games, etc., because we usually do. Number 9 is Clerks 2. Again, we're just going backwards. Clerks 2 is, they're a little bit older. They're coming to terms with now they're in their adult years. They've got to really figure out what they're doing with their lives. But also, the goddamn fucking Lord of the Rings has divided our culture and our community. And now we have people that are like, yay, Star Wars, boo, Lord of the Rings. And you have weirdos that are, yay, Lord of the Rings, what the fuck is Star Wars? And I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, Star Wars literally created the sci-fi nerd culture that we are obsessed with. We wouldn't have The Matrix or Jurassic Park or anything we have today if Star Wars hadn't been a success. And so they tackle that in this movie while also tackling the fact that, dude, it's just a movie, get over it. You know what I mean? And some other hilarity ensues, and it's a fun movie. Number 8 is Empire Records. This one is more of a specialty subset of nerd culture, specifically the music nerds. Which also encompasses the band geeks, who some of them tried to pass themselves off as cool, air quotes, by, forming rock bands or whatever in high school, but also hanging out at the record store and pretentiously talking about their favorite bands and the record industry and etc. Now, Empire Records is higher on the list than it should be, just by way of the fact that this entire movie is extinct. It cannot happen today, because in today's world, there's no such thing as a record store. They do not exist anymore. And had this movie been the exact same movie, but set in a video rental store, it would be higher on the list. But it is what it is. Because, to the best of my knowledge, they've never made a movie set in a video rental store. Other than, kinda, sorta, Be Kind, Rewind, but we don't talk about that piece of shit. Number 7 is The Benchwarmers. This is another one of those, hero quest type stories where the nerds, come together, band together to overcome the bullies. And it's like that, that, yay, heartwarming kind of story. Moving on. Number 6 is Hackers. Now, I have to point out that in the context of the film, this movie does accurately capture the attitudes and the, I would say, the interests of computer nerds in the 90s, while also being absolutely ridiculously unrealistic in its use of technology. Because none of the shit they do in this movie was ever possible, not even today. So you could almost lump this under a sci-fi type of film where it's like, or alternate universe where it's like, yeah, in their world, in this movie, yeah, sure, that's how computers work. It's also a time capsule because this is the old school style of hacking, before, basically what we have today became the norm. Also, kind of, sort of, back when hacker meant someone who was just really interested in understanding how computers work and piecing them together and deconstructing them and understanding the ins and outs of them, rather than the term as used today, meaning some asshole trying to steal your credit card info. Number 5 is War Games. Now, War Games is very similar to Hackers in that, again, it very accurately captures the interests and the mentality and characteristics of what a computer nerd would have been like in 1983, but also, like Hackers, bonkers unrealistic sci-fi technology for the time. Now, do we have technology today that is somewhat comparable to the technology depicted in this film? Oh, yes, we absolutely do. But we did it in 1983. But it's still a fun movie to watch. And it's actually a sci-fi crime thriller. This is like the most serious, most like intense movie on this list. Like, most of these are lighthearted comedies or just like bonkers sci-fi B movies. Most of these. This one is not. Number 4 is Mallrats. Again, this movie is higher on the list than it probably deserves to be, but my reasoning for that is multifaceted. One, like, what was the movie I mentioned earlier? Empire Records. This one is a time capsule of a aspect of nerd culture that is extinct. The hanging out all day at the shopping mall doesn't happen anymore, because the modern day shopping mall is not the nerd paradise the 90s mega shopping mall was. The video arcade, a thing of the past, or if it does exist, is not the same as what we grew up with. The food court, again, a thing of the past. You know, the comic book shop smack dab in the middle of the mall, that's unheard of today. Comic book shops by and large don't even exist at all anymore, let alone in shopping malls. So there's that aspect to it. There's also, the main characters are comic book nerds. They're on a quest to buy comic books. That's literally the point of the movie. They're just trying to buy comic books, but they're also trying to repair their broken relationships with their girlfriends, but they're also getting into hijinks. There's Jay and Silent Bob doing their thing. You know, there's references to, comic books and science fiction and everything else. Having actual nerd conversations real nerds would have had back in the day, before we had message boards and the internet and Twitter and everything else. And Mallrats is high on the list because it's a personal favorite of mine. I fucking love this movie. I've seen it more times than almost any other Kevin Smith movie. Almost. Number 3 is The Breakfast Club. This is another one of those nerd fantasy, pseudo-unrealistic but hopeful movies where it's like the nerd and the jock and the punk rocker and the crazy chick and everybody all come together and make peace and become friends. That never fucking happened in real life. Never anywhere in the world did that happen in real life. But it's fun to fantasize about. And The Breakfast Club does a really good job depicting the stereotypical, at the time, social outcast, aka nerd. Academic, having a social circle of other academics that are looked down on by the quote-unquote cool kids, or normal kids, or whatever, everybody else. Number 2, some people are going to be screaming, that should be number 1. Number 2 is Ready Player One. This movie is way the fuck high on the list because it's nerd reference Easter egg overload. There's too many nerd culture references and Easter eggs and, just too much. This movie is like everything everything you've ever watched, every video game you've ever played, every comic book you've ever read, every argument you've ever had, all wrapped up in one movie. It's intense, and it's hilarious, and it's fun, And it's just it's just a good fucking ride. Now, if you've been paying attention to my list, or my other videos, or my life experiences in general, you can probably guess what number one is. I'll give you a moment to pause the video and type it into the credits, or comments, excuse me, what you think number one's gonna be. If you said Clerks, pat yourself on the back. It's fucking Clerks. There is not a movie ever made, nor will there ever be another movie made, that just encapsulates nerd culture like Clerks. It's literally just a fucking, hey, I want to go to work and, hug my girlfriend and, rent videos at the video store and talk about Star Wars and, not get into a weird discussion with my friends about X-rated stuff. And just like a regular, it's just nerds living their lives. It's just regular nerds living their lives, They're like, yeah, we like comic books. Yeah, we like video games. Yeah, we like sci-fi and horror and everything else. But also, we're just regular people with regular-ass jobs trying to live our regular-ass lives. And nothing speaks to me more than this movie. Because it's like, yeah, I've worked at a gas station. I know what the fuck it's like. I know what Dante feels like when he's getting called in on his day off, because I've had that happen to me before. It fucking sucks. Especially when you had plans that day with your other nerd friends. Also, we wouldn't have Chasing Amy or Mallrats, or we wouldn't even have Ready Player One if Clerks hadn't been a humongous success. So, stay cool.